At our last board meeting, President Norwood asked me to define strategic goal number 1, a culture of we. So I have a few slides to help me do that. There we go. So culture of we is something that started when I became interim superintendent in 2016. And this is a clipping from a newspaper article which was written by Alia Mohammed. You may remember her. She was a Milpitas Post reporter who actually went to school in Milpitas Unified. And she was very focused on human rights, social issues, and telling stories of people. And so she took time to talk with me about my journey that it took me to Milpitas Unified and how I came to be superintendent. And I talked with her about a culture of we and what that means. And I'd like to just lift up this quote that she has here, which is, whereas principal, you have your school and your community, and you're doing it together with the staff and students, trying to build climates that are welcoming for students and parents. And I'm doing that, but not just for one school, but for all of our schools. And that includes our school communities and families. And it's exciting to have the opportunity to work with the city government and the city manager and community leaders to create a climate where everybody feels appreciated and everyone's culture is celebrated and valued. That summer, at the Welcome Back, I focused on family. And this is one of the slides from that presentation, talking about how important it is that we remember our roots, because who we are, where we come from, matters. And it matters to us, and it matters to our students, and it matters to our families. The next year, in 2017, I talked about what a culture of we means to me, and I asked what a culture of we means to you. And I talked about equity. The following year, in 2018, I talked about the power of we. I talked about how we had students who were recognized in our secondary, post-secondary class for their accomplishments. I talked about community members who give their time to ensure that we can raise money for students who can't afford clothing for schools and those who come and take them through. At that time, it was Mervyn's and Kohl's for shopping. I talked about how our football team, our championship football team, was recognized at the Capitol, and the way they got there was through being a championship team. I talked about how we have people who have talents in the arts and people who have talents in science, and how that came to be recognized by others because of their sense of belonging and culture and team. I also talked about how our classified team members are integral to the support and success of all of our work and initiatives. And here we have 2 of them who supported our Saturday field trips in our L4L, Love for Literacy program. I also talked about how important it is that our learners see themselves and experience themselves and their histories and that of others in what they read, what they write, what they discuss, and what they learn. And I talked about cultivating that we through something called Sankofa, which is an African symbol and meaning to always go back and fetch what was forgotten, but always keep your head looking forward. The following year was 2019. And in that year, I talked about how with the culture of we are making strides in meeting that strategic goal. I talked about how Zenker has a group of families who are working with their staff members to develop a deeper sense of culture and understanding about history through the eyes of, at that time, it was those with African ancestry, and not just a month, but a whole entire school, which then shared its instruction with others throughout the district. And about how working with our manufacturing day with our partners at the city as well as partners in businesses, our students were exposed to different pathways that they might accomplish because we came together. I also talked about how we received visitors from China and other parts of the world, and how every one of us has a place in learning from each other and learning how our different perspectives and the different cultures help to shape that learning. I also talked about how a culture of we was even beginning to pick up, and San Jose City College, as you see here, now has that in a lot of their presentations. And then how together as a family, we recognize our children, our friends, our family, our spouses, and how always our classified employees are a part of the learning. And then 2020. In January 24th, 2020, we had our first ever every single team member together for a professional development day, which was developed and choreographed and organized by over 30 of our own staff members. And we made 3 commitments that day, which we talk about periodically. The first is to speak up, stand up, interrupt the uncomfortable, the hurtful, the harmful, and other behavior. And I have to say, during this past year, I have been called out on this by some of our staff members, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that people feel comfortable enough, that they feel and can live the culture of we enough to understand that they can go to the superintendent and they can call out that superintendent on something they feel was not right. Ensure our learners see themselves in what they learn. That's our other commitment. And I know that we have every single one of you in the classroom, as well as those who support the learning, looking at different ways to make sure our literature, make sure our apps, make sure our holidays, make sure our recognition, that our students see themselves, that it's no longer just the old history of the Europeans, of the dominant culture, but we are really trying to infuse that. We have next board meeting, we will hear about our ethnic studies program. And then investing and discovering our own biases so we can change them through action. We've now had 4 days where together for either an hour or the whole day, we have come together to recognize and learn other aspects of what bias is, what equity is, what diversity is, and our role in taking action. There are facets of a culture of we. There's family. There's a family in MUSD, and I love to say to people, especially when I'm talking to groups of parents, about how the sense of family in MUSD is generations deep and arms wide open to accept new residents from all parts of the world. And this happens to be a picture of Rashawn, who is the son of one of my former students, who is the aunt, and he's also the nephew of one of our school secretaries. That's just an example of generations deep. Another facet of our culture of we is that we are inclusive. Every single person matters. It's not your position that defines you, it's who you are. And that in MUSD, we are committed to ensuring that everybody has an opportunity to developing their own capacity and their pathway, and to learn more about themselves so they can be better at what they do. Everybody has a voice. And then there's equity. This is one of our young leaders who is preparing for the first time ever MUSD going to the Women's History March, to the Women's March. And we've made a commitment. We have a group of about 20 people with a core group, and they are our Culture of We equity leaders. Through our significant disproportionate report that the state has identified us as, we will have a person who is focused on equity for at least the 2 years that we are involved in making sure that there is equity for our students. And diversity. Diversity is strength. Diversity is something that attracts people to Milpitas Unified. It's something that attracts them to the community of Milpitas. It's diversity in economics and demographics. It's diversity in our experiences. It's diversity in our ethnicities and in our cultures and in our faith. And it's diversity in our politics. It's diversity in the way that we think. Because when we have a culture of we where people feel strong enough to stand up and say, I don't agree with that, and know that it's okay to have a difference of opinion and that we will work through things, that's what a culture of we is about. It's not about everybody always being happy together. It's not about everybody always being getting what they want. It's not about one group of people having a say over another group of people. It's about honoring that diversity in our thinking and in our beliefs and in what we value. Up here in the left corner is the class of 2021. At the last Trojan Olympics, we got to share together before COVID. And for those of you who have had the opportunity to go to a Trojan Olympics, it's really magical because you have hundreds of students who are there. And yes, they're excited about winning for their class. But what really stands out is how they're there for each other and how they'll even take a moment to make sure that the freshmen succeed, to make sure the sophomores succeed. And who would have thought in that class of 2021 that they would experience something so magnificently tragic in some ways, awesome in others, and completely something that could isolate us if we don't take purposeful intentions to make sure that we stay together. And who'd have thought that the class of 2021 would have a world that is so alert and in the moment that finally people are recognizing that every person matters and that every person should have the opportunity to the same kinds of experiences, and that it's important for us to stand up and speak out for those who need us to be allies. And who would have thought that 2021 would see us distributing 2,000 boxes of food before winter break? And in just 2 short days, upon hearing that we would have this food to deliver to our families, being able to pull together a group of volunteers from the classroom, from the offices, from the grounds, to help make sure that 2,000 families in Milpitas Unified had something to eat. Building a culture of we is difficult, challenging, and essential. A culture of we is not something that is easy. It's not a label. It's not a slogan. It's a way of being, and it's worth working for. And for as long as I am superintendent, I will continue to work for a culture of we.